What's happening in the farm machinery market, new and used equipment values, and more importantly, is it a crystal ball and a projection of where things are going in agriculture? I think it is. I'll be coming up with more great information on that topic with Casey Seymour. Hey, Damian Mason here with a question before we hop into this episode of The Business of Agriculture. If you farm for a living, you employ a lot of amazing technology, from your inputs that you put into the soil to the tractor that you sit in, your combine, and the amazing data that it harvests. But has your soil analytics kept up technologically with everything else in your farming operation? I would venture to say that no, it is not. Sure, you check for your nitrogen, your phosphorus, your potassium, your micronutrients as well. But what about disease pressure? Do you know what diseases and what pests you're going to face next year? No, you don't. But you can now figure that out with Pattern Ag's predictive analytics. Think about it. They can tell you now with testing what the likelihood of facing nasty diseases, things like cyst nematode or sudden death syndrome, what the likelihood of you having this in your field. Then you know how to prepare, how to treat, and where to invest your money. It's using technology to make you bigger yields and therefore make you bigger money. Go to www.pattern.ag to learn more. They are pioneering the way in predictive agronomy. Hey there, welcome to another fantastic episode of the Business of Agriculture podcast. It's me, your host, Damian Mason. I've got a great show for you today because I got one of my buddies. He's Casey Seymour with Moving Iron LLC, the Moving Iron podcast. He has been on here before. I have also spoken at the convention he puts on every year. This year, it's going to be in Nashville. We're talking about machinery, new and used. He's got a breadth of knowledge that is wide and deep, trust me. And we're going to talk about what the values look like, what's happening, the auction markets, what's happening with interest rates, and what we think is going to happen moving forward in farm machinery and the general broader farm economy. Also, what's happening with new technology and machinery. Thanks for being here, my friend.
Damian, appreciate you, man. Thanks for having me back on.
So, all right. You are really on this. You've got your finger on it. You said before we hit the record button, we're seeing the used machinery auction market heating up earlier than usual. Let's start there. By the way, we're recording this in September of 2023, just for reference.
Oh, okay. Well, you look and see what's happening right now, and it's not uncommon to see some late summer auctions come through, but the volume that we've seen come through since, end of May all the way through June and July, when you see what stuff happening in August, especially the number of machines that are out there and the caliber of machine that's out there. You usually don't you don't really start seeing that heat up until, sometime mid-September through the end of the year. And it just, continually gets bigger and bigger with that crescendo sometime late November, early December as kind of the peak. And, if you take a look at where we were last year and even in the 2018, 2019 timeframe, the numbers are pretty close to what we saw towards the end of the year as far as volume goes, which I think is a direct reflection of the high price equipment that we see out there right now on the used equipment marketplace, and, interest rates playing into that a little bit as well.
So for the person that's listening to this, that maybe they work in ag, I get a lot of different variety of listeners, kind of to clarify why it normally is later in the season when used machinery. And by the way, it's a huge industry. Your Moving Iron was all about tracking values and bringing in used machinery dealers. Your conference you have that I spoke at a couple of years ago, it's because it's a way bigger thing. Like it's I guess used cars. It's not quite like used cars. It's not quite like other stuff. So kind of speak to why used machinery. It's the trade down, and then the way it goes from bigger, huge farms to less acreage farms and all that. So kind of speak to the why used machinery is such a big thing in ag.
Yeah, I think kind of use the used car analogy a little bit. You're looking at, a guy out there that buys the brand new, Ford F-150 Platinum Edition. That's whatever those are now, $90,000 truck or $85,000 truck, whatever it is. Not everybody can afford that. So as you're looking through, come in, a guy that comes in, trades it out every 25 or 30,000 miles, and it comes back in and it's, now it's, whatever, 65,000 or 70,000. And then it goes, uses it for another 30,000 miles. And next thing you know, it's down to 50 and so on and so forth. Same scenario on the used equipment side. When you're looking at the volume of some of these machines as they come down, every manufacturer has different programs out there that are going to allow for, volume discounts and those kind of things. And those discounts get applied to those new machines, and it helps bring down that price, which then you start looking at how those things are traded through the trade cycle and those kind of things. You get an opportunity to have a $650,000 combine, you use it for a season and now it's worth, 500,000 or whatever it is. And then, it gets used for a couple more seasons and now you're down to, 250, 300,000. And that cycle kind of rolls through there. And I'm a firm believer that as this machinery has gotten more expensive and things have gotten more complicated, as just looking at technology and those kind of things, that buying groups are being more solidified. So the 1-year-old, 2-year-old buyer, the 3 to 5-year-old buyer, the 6 to 10-year-old buyer, those guys are more locked into what they've normally been into those trade cycles more than we've seen in the past, where, to go back to like 2012, 2010, something like that, it wasn't uncommon to have a guy trade in a 9600 combine on a brand new 9770. And the reason for that was at the time, the 9600, when you traded it in, it would have been about a 10-year-old machine or so, something like that. That machine would have had $40,000 worth of value, assuming that it's paid for. That was 20% down on your new 9770. Well, today you're not seeing that happen. You're 20% down on $650,000 is what, that'd be $130,000. I mean, so those numbers have gotten to the point now where these buying groups are kind of stuck in these areas, which I also think when you look at used equipment values, it's I don't want to say propping up, that's not the right word to use there, but those values are becoming more stable, and you're seeing less volatility in those market bases because people can't skip around and jump around. You know what I mean? They're kind of in that one spot.
Okay, so Casey, I want to kind of go with Okay, first off, you said one thing. You talked about folks get solidified in this category. Now, again, we're not making a judgment. It's just who it is. There's going to be this very large scale farming operation that probably is on a program with the John Deere's, AGCO's, Case New Holland's, whatever. They get the new equipment and they run it for a year, maybe 2, right? Mm-hmm. And then that machine goes into the next thing. And then there's the category of operation that takes that and uses it from a 2-year-old to a 5 or 6-year-old, running it for 3 to 4 years, I think is what I'm hearing you say. Yep. And when you said it's gotten to where the operation is more entrenched in this is what we do, because it's probably because it gives them the horsepower, it gives them the right equipment, it gives them the right technology for their operation. And also probably from a cash management situation, it just becomes, we just get fixed into, the bank likes us to do it this way. Is that kind of why and obviously by the time the machine is 15, 20 years old, there's less demand and it becomes more very small scale or a smaller scale operator that might even be paying cash for it. And those things are, our little operation made money and we just went out and bought this to avoid paying taxes. Is that kind of where the thing goes? 2 years, 5 years, 8 years, and then down there?
Yeah, pretty much. I mean, you see that across the spectrum that way. And I think the kind of one more clarifying point on that too is if you look back at some of these guys, I mean, the last machine they bought might have been a new one, but they can't go buy the new one now because they don't have the equity or whatever it is. They don't have the dollars, don't make sense for the acres they farm and those kind of things. So you start looking at that. The other big factor into this thing too, that's defining some of these buying habits, is not just necessarily the what the dollars and cents look like. It's who's coming back to the farm. And what's that generational aspect look like too? Because some of these guys are looking at, I'm going to farm for 5 more years. No one's coming back. I'm not going to burn up a bunch of equity on a new machine or whatever it is. I'm going to maintain what I've got and kind of keep mushing my way through that. We're seeing a lot, I hear a lot of stories from guys I work with that are, guys retiring, no one's coming back. You got the family that's got the generational aspect coming back in, and they're going to pick up this 1,000 acres, 1,500 acres, 5,000 acres, whatever it is, from the neighbor that they're going to do. And that then opens up that door to, now they've changed what they're doing. They may have been that 1 or 2 year old buyer and they may stay there because that makes sense for what they're doing. They like that aspect, but it also opens the door up now. Like I can now move into the, maybe I'm buying new now, and stuff like that. So that those kind of things start to take place, and when that happens, I hear a lot of people toss around, we're moving into more of a construction-based model as far as what that looks like. And I agree with that to some extent.
Construction-based model. Remember, you play in this sandbox every day. Machinery people, by the way, dear listener, I think it's important or viewer, reminder, if you are a listener to the Business of Agriculture, you can also watch it and see handsome people like Casey Seymour on the Damian Mason YouTube channel. Go to YouTube, type in Damian Mason, and subscribe. It's free. Also on Acres TV, the streaming ag platform invented by the Hefty brothers. It's called Watch Acres TV. Type it in and you'll be on your browser. You can watch me there. Anyway, machinery people might be as bad as anyone. They have their own vernacular. They have their own way of talking. It's kind of like, a bunch of baseball managers getting together for beers. Well, yeah, and then this guy, I wouldn't put him on that mud program. And then we did inventory price, full line pricing. And then it's like nobody understands what the hell you're talking about other than you. So you guys all get together and you love machinery and you love you're in your own little world. It's a construction model. What the hell does that mean?
So from a perspective of graduating from this was dad's tractor, this is mom's tractor, this is the chore tractor, this is that, everybody had their own little pet tractor that they love and feel. Anymore, if you look at some of these operations that you're looking, a lot of these equipment, it's an input on the farm, and that mindset's changing over time frame. So when I say construction model, that's what I'm talking about, because they're looking at, I need 8 bulldozers for this job, and that's what I need to do, right? It's just a widget to make.
It's not an emotional, right. Although there's still emotion about brand.
Oh, there's plenty of emotion out there.
I still find it interesting.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. There's still some of that out there, but I think some of that too is waning too when you start looking at the dollars and cents that are associated with it. I mean, waning's probably not, might be a little strong, but you look and see where these manufacturers are falling in, what they're doing, and the programs that are associated with them. So much of it's based around technology, and right now, if you look at where technology's at, I mean, obviously John Deere has a leg up on that, and that's driving, I think, a lot of people into more looking at upgrade kits. I think is another thing to look at there too, where you've got a lot of that moving forward.
Casey, I got to tell you that I find it amusing. In fact, I bought stock in John Deere because I was just at Farm Progress show, and there's, as you've been there, Husker Harvest Days, same thing. Bunch of people walking around that are never going to buy anything, that aren't even farm operators, filling their 5-gallon bucket that the seed company gave them with free rain gauges and sticker magnets and whatever else. Every booth they go to, well, come on, get it for free. By golly, you go to the John Deere booth, they not only don't give crap away for free, they have a merchandise tent. You want John Deere stuff, you come up and pay for it. And all those bumpkins that wouldn't pay a nickel for a rain gauge are standing there paying $35 for John Deere stuff. That's where the power of branding comes in. I've always been very impressed with John Deere. But now that I've said that, if I'm a farmer, I don't think I'm going to be brand loyal to a color of paint. I'm going to be, I love my Coors. I love my Coca-Cola because that's a matter of how that tastes in my, and goes down in my belly. But when it comes to a machine that goes out and does the farm work, I'm going to whore it up. I'm going to go with whatever the deal is that gets me the best deal on the best technology to accomplish the job. I still don't think that it's that way. And you say it's getting a little bit more that way.
Yeah, so Aaron Fennell, that's on my podcast with me from time to time, and we talk about this. Aaron Fennell's a 90-year-old man stuck in a 40-year-old body. So I mean, he's a very old school approach to technology and what is about. I love the guy to death, but when I look at what's coming down the pike here, I don't see. I think the days of having to get the brand new piece of equipment to get the latest technology are all but gone. I think that the upgrade kit that's out there for planters, you see them right now in sprayers, are probably the two easiest ones to talk about. As those machines get updated and you can take your bar and put new stuff on there and make it new again, some of that's taking place and taking hold, and you're seeing more and more people do that because, quite frankly, it's half as much roughly to do all that, right? Same thing with your sprayer. So I really think that we're 5 years away from really having, if not sooner, of really having, machinery values being based upon what it can be upgraded to, and not necessarily how old it is, because I think that's going to have a bigger play in the marketplace. Looking at some of the stuff,
we enjoy talking so much that then we get off on these topics because I like talking machinery with you, but we never really got into the thing when you said the used auction sites and the used equipment market is hotter earlier than traditionally. So the person that's wondering why that is, historically, isn't it get through harvests, decide what your money looks like, then decide what you're going to do. And that's when, and also there's more spare time, free time. That's why it's more back ended into the season. The reason it's earlier in the season then is historically it's been later in the season. It's earlier this season because I'm worried I won't get the piece of equipment. Is that still like a hangover from COVID? I'm going to start bidding and looking for equipment sooner because I know I need it next year. And if I don't get this stuff bought, it might slip away. Is that one of the reasons? Or is it because money management? What's the reason?
Well, I think what we've seen so far this year, as early as stuff has gotten through, has a couple things. One is there is a lot of inventory out there that's coming in because it went from, not being able to get things consistently steady from the manufacturers to where now we're getting stuff just bang, 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 and all this stuff's coming in at one time, kind of flooding the market a little bit. But also the cost to hold stuff from the dealership perspective is another thing. I talked with Zach Heiner at Merit Auctions here not too long ago, and he has on the podcast.
That's my neighbor.
That is your neighbor. And Zach brought up a good point. He said some of the stuff that we're running through our auction right now is going from the farm to the auction block. It's not even coming into the lot, which is something different than we've seen in the past. And I think a lot of that, you're looking at holding costs anywhere between, 7 and 8%, but the dealer side of that, if you have a $450,000 something out there, you're spending $3,500 a month to hold that thing on your lot. It's not, from a cash flow perspective, you're paying interest on that every day. And those are things that we haven't had to, in my career, I started doing this in 2006. And that when I started doing this, interest rates were like 6.5%, 5.5%, something like that. And then, of course, we had 2008 come along, and it's been 0% ever since. And up until this last 4 or 5 years, we haven't really seen interest rates like this to where the impact of interest and on the dealership perspective side of stuff has really impacted the decision making process because 2012 through 14, 15, those really tight markets where we had to auction off quite a bit of stuff, interest rates are 2.5%.
And when you say it was really tight, meaning things were not that good. We had our big, there's a ag super cycle from about 2005 through 2013. When you say 2014 through 18, there was a little more softness in the market, and ag didn't have as much spare cash, so more stuff went to auction. But you weren't as hurried because you're paying 2.5 to 3 to 4% interest. Yeah, I've got my statements here from the bank and from Farm Credit. I don't use much in the way of operating money because I'm not, a cropland farmer. I rent my ground out. I got a statement here that says 9.6% for operating money from one of these institutions. Like you said, you're sitting on a piece of equipment for 2 months and you're using operating money. You're paying a significant amount of interest when those machines are worth, like you said, $400,000 or $500,000.
Yeah. So I think that's, to me, as I look back on it, after kind of sitting back and reflecting and thinking about it a little bit, I think a lot of that has to do with the fact that most of the stuff that we're seeing go through auction right now is, one, the market's still, it's not soft yet. It's not to the point where I would start pushing a panic button, but it's to the point where you can still get a decent amount of money for your machine and you can still see these things move through there. Now, all that being said, these last few auctions here that I've watched, we're kind of hitting that a really good one and a really bad one, and nothing. You're starting to see that volatility come in, so that tells me that there's some softening looming there on the horizon that we need to pay attention to moving into 2024.
Very interesting. Like when we talk about, if you keep up with just say residential housing, where it's running crazy, and then it's so soft that people are foreclosing. It's the time before each of those that you see it's not equal everywhere. It's not even equal within kind of the same state. That's what you're talking about. That now you're seeing it's not a running of the bulls, but it's also not a meltdown and a dumpster fire.
Yeah. I've watched a couple auctions that have been pretty. I thought if they were my machines selling, I would have been happy. Right. Yeah. 2 days ago, I watched one and I'm like, that was a bad one, and it was, but the one right after it had similar machine on it was good too. And I think a lot of that too is just, um, not every day is the best day to sell something, but also too, there's so much marketing that goes involved with all these equipment now, auctions now that we didn't see 10 years ago, because the online auction was a part of a live auction. So you had this bigger kind of fanfare thing going, and now everything is a live auction that starts a week beforehand. And the ones I've watched have been very intriguing on the fact that typically when you watch an online sale, 75-80% of the value is baked into that on the last day of bidding. And I've watched some of these sell where the machines doubled in price in the last hour. And I think I'm watching guys bid on stuff not to win, but not to lose. And I think that's the key takeaway there is they may have put in a proxy bid and said, this is my top dollar, and I'm not even going to watch it. If I win, I win. If I don't, I don't. Of course, you still got these guys out there banging the mouse, making things happen, but it's just really weird to watch something, a $500,000 X9 combine end up at $504,000. And 36 minutes before that, it was 375 or 400,000. You know what I mean? So that's a big number to move at $500 or $1,000 a whack.
Yeah, well, obviously we've all been to a live auction where people all sit on their hands when they think they're going to start this piece of farm ground at $2,500 an acre, and everybody thinks, oh crap, maybe we'll get bought for that. No, it sells for $12,000 an acre. It all happens because finally at the end somebody starts realizing reality kicks in. Reminds you a little bit of those indoor speed skating in the Winter Olympics, where they all just sort of puts around and look at each other, and then all of a sudden they say, "Shit, it's time to go," and then they take off. That's kind of what I mean.
Yeah, that's pretty accurate. But the difference.
I want to say though, we're going to cover first off. We promised the viewers, listeners that they're going to hear about your assessment is the barometer of the ag economy, and also as a crystal ball for the future. I want to get to that. I want to talk about equipment size, and are we getting too big for small farms? And I want to talk about the subscription concept, which I see on the technology side. I want to get your assessment on that. Before I do that, I want to ask you, dear listener, are you interested in upping your regenerative game? No, I'm not talking about being a tree hugger. I'm not talking about going out, and like wearing, taking off your shoes and running around and like listening to the Grateful Dead. It's not that way. We're talking about simple things like cover cropping, reduction of tillage, things that maybe are good for your ground and probably are good for your ground that you should be doing anyhow, and then getting paid for it. Truterra can help you on your regenerative journey to take what your ground is, make it more valuable, comply with some of the things that I think are going to be eventually regulated. Yes, I said that. I think eventually, but to be a participant, my prediction is to be a USDA program participant 10 years from now, you're going to be doing certain practices that right now you do not do. I'm talking about cover cropping, reduced tillage, various environmental stewardship and ground farmland stewardship things. Why don't you get ahead of the curve by going on truterraag.com and learning about their program? You can get paid to put in cover crop to reduce tillage, carbon sequestration, nitrate and nitrous reduction. These are the kind of things that the future are going to hold. truterraag.com. Find the right program for the right field at truterraag.com to help you on a regenerative journey and also make money doing so. All right. Which one you want to go with? I said barometer of the economy, subscription concept, too big for small farmers. Which one of those do you want to take?
Let's go with too big for small farms for 500.
So
please.
You just told me the way it usually goes, and farm equipment's gotten bigger since I was a kid, and ever since you were a kid. There are still smaller operators in my part of the world. There are still smaller operators, and they are definitely generally not buying the new stuff, not even buying the 2-year-old stuff, not even buying the 5-year-old stuff. They tend to be down here. But even the stuff that's 5, 7, 8 years old, that might be too big for someone that says, yeah, my wife and I have jobs, but also we inherited some ground. And then the neighbors and I have been friends since we were kids. We farm 500 acres, 400 acres, which, is small by today's standards. Sure. They don't need a 16-row planter. They don't need a $600,000 combine. Is there a piece of equipment still for them? Or is it, by the time it's small enough for them, are we talking about stuff that's almost antiquated?
It's hard to find, if you're looking for an 8-row planter, depending on where you're at in the world, it's a hard thing to find. If you're in the heart of the Corn Belt, trying to find an 8-row planter, I think would be a difficult thing to do. And I'm sure someone's listening to this like, oh bullshit, I can go over here and do
now. Is that because they don't exist anymore because we haven't been making 8-row planters for a long time, or because those that are out there just are tightly held because of the person that says, yeah, my wife and I farm 500 acres and we're small scale, but we keep our equipment and that's what we do.
Yeah, I think it's more the latter. I mean, I think it's just there's not as many. I mean, there's not a lot of people ordering 8-row planters new from the factory, so you got to have a new one to have a used one, and I think that's we're seeing there. So a lot of 12-row planters out there. I think 12-row in a lot of is a small planter now. I don't think you see as many those. But now, if you go down like into the South, into like Georgia and into Alabama and those places like the deep South where their planting windows, 92 days long or whatever it is, they don't need to have a 24-row planter because they can do it with an 8 or a 12, and it just takes them longer to plant the crop. And that's totally fine. You talk to those, my buddies down there that are in the equipment business, they joke about that all the time, like how pressured we are up here to get our crop in. And then they might take 3 or 4 days off during plant season to go do whatever. And it's just the difference in that. So you see some different thing in there. I think to your point, when you're talking about too big for the farm, the flow of equipment from south to north and north to south make a big difference in what you're talking about, because in a lot of these instances with equipment, the way they've made it over the last, 10 years, probably, there's a lot of big horsepower in small packages right now comparatively to what it used to be. So there are some options out there. If you're looking for a 200 horsepower tractor, you can get that in basically a loader style size tractor anymore and still be, functionally able to go out and pull a 12-row planter if you need to.
Yeah. Okay. So, and I think that, when you look at it, USDA programs, there's a lot of sentiment. The current administration is tossing money at frankly, they've just forgiven the loans of 3,500 farm operations. Well, you and I both know that those are probably not the most forward thinking. If they're not making money, if you can't pay your loans and the way the things have been the last 4 years, you probably should be bankrupt. But there's a lot of sentiment to keep small scale or even inefficient operations going. That then should prop up demand for smaller scale equipment. Where is it? Yeah.
And I think that's going to be something we continue to see to be a struggle. And I think ultimately equipment gets smaller as people quit driving them and there's more of them in the field. I think, autonomy is going to play into that. I don't see a lot of guys that are doing that. You're aware of this as anybody else listening to the show, the whole idea of corporate farms and those kind of things gets tossed around a lot. And there's very few farming operations out there that they're corporate. Don't get me wrong, they have a corporation, right, but it's a family farm. You know what I mean? And they've got multiple generations working in there, and they're farming big number of acres, and that's what that is. But when I look at the size of equipment and where it's at, if you go out and read some of these manufacturers, what do they call that? It's completely environmental. What's the tag word where they've got the environmental societal
plan or environmental?
ESG.
Alliance?
The ESG.
ESG.
Yeah.
Okay.
You go out and read some of their ESG.
I hate it so much. I don't even like it being said, but go ahead.
But you go out and read some of the stuff that they're talking about, and they talk about equipment being built to offset the carbon footprint of whatever, because now it's bigger and it's going to replace 2 machines now instead of 1, and some of that stuff coming into play. And I think, you start looking at words like, rebuild, regenerate, and reuse, and those kind of things that are getting tossed around out there. More and more of these machines are just going to be retrofitted to go do that. And I think from a dollars and cents perspective, the too big to farm thing like you're talking about there, to me, I think that opens up a door for someone to say, I can still be a small farmer now and get the latest technology. I don't need to go out and spend millions and millions and millions of dollars to get 2 tractors, and then I can do this.
So what you're saying is, because we've got a bunch of this stuff that you kind of can retrofit. Maybe you're saying I'm a smaller operator. Like I said, the example I just gave, which hell, I could be that maybe someday. hey, Lori and I, we want to be here in the good season. We will go to Arizona, and we've got 400 acres, whatever the number should be. I really might only need an old piece of equipment, an older tractor, older planter, but upgrade it with the new stuff, and then it's modern.
Right. And I think I look at power units now, and look at a tractor and those kind of things, that somebody somewhere bought their last tractor that they're ever going to buy, and not because they're going to retire, but because they can keep upgrading it to whatever. And sooner or later there's a battery operated, battery power generation, upgrade kit that you can put on it, or whatever it is that you're doing. As I look and see at my crystal ball, and I look and see what's coming down the line, I see a lot of guys that are going to look at the last complete planter they bought from a factory, maybe the one they bought right now. They run that bar or, however long till it gets to the point where they can't use it anymore. And then they go to Ortho Manufacturing or whatever and get a new bar and then hang new row units off of it. And they go back, or the row units they just put on their bar type of thing. And they go back to that way. So I think I look at this from a perspective of the more technology comes into play, the more equipment, I really think it gets cheaper in the grand scheme of things to not necessarily the dollars and cents to upgrade it gets cheaper, but the dollars and cents to operate the equipment on your farm gets cheaper because of, there's more technology out there, and I don't need to go buy the iron associated with that. I just need to buy the technology and operating systems and those kind of things to make it work.
Casey, to the person that's listening to this that is like in the food processing business, this might sound crazy because now they're probably saying, well, what technology? They probably might still, and they have this idea that like we've been ahead of Main Street for a long time. We had self-driving tractors a long time ago. So when you talk about technology, I assume you're talking about data collection of the crop, of the harvest, or data collection of the planting, or the ability to set a variable rate applications. That's the kind of technology. So it's not the big piece of equipment, it's the thing that's attached to it, that's the electronics, et cetera, that you're talking about.
Yeah. And I think we'll use variable rate technology as an example for this. I mean, 2012, 13, 14, you could get a planter that had half width shut off, right? And that means that if you had a 24-row planter, you could shut off 12 rows as you made a turn, and it would only plant 12. Now you not only can you shut them off, but you can speed up and slow down what you're doing based around the soil conditions and stuff that you're looking at. So you might be planting 30,000 seeds an acre in this just immediate patch right in front of your face. And then 2 seconds later, you're planting 10,000 seeds an acre, all based around those kind of things. That technology is not subjugated to going out and buying a new planter. Now you can get that same technology on your 2014 planter bar and just put the new row units on there. I mean, so those kind of things that you're looking at now have really changed in the way the equipment business is looking at and being fostered anymore. It's not, I mean, what trading equipment looks like in 5 years to me is going to blow my mind, because it's going to be so different than what we're looking at right now.
Right. Well, first off, it's going to have a bunch of technologies. Secondly, the technology, it may not be it might be a hybrid. It's going to have, it might have, imagine like this thing from Apple, this thing from John Deere, this thing from a company that's out of Europe. I mean, it could be a bunch of different computer wiring, technology. Hey, when we talk about your crystal ball, the subscription concept, people have been bitching about it. Well, I bought that John Deere tractor and now they won't let me fix it. Oh my God, have I had to hear about that? I'm like, well, it might just mean that you don't have a warranty when you fix it. And then it became, well, do you ever actually own anything if you have to then pay for the service? I think what this is really indicative of is eventually you're going to just, and the companies are doing this, you're going to just pay for ongoing upgrades and updates to the technology part of it. The engine, the horsepower, whatever, the tires, that's not really where we're talking about. Isn't it the technology? Is that what I'm thinking we're going to see, or what's your perspective?
Yeah, I mean, I think, the car industry went through this 8 years ago or whatever it was. Ray Bozak, good guy. I had him on the podcast a couple of times. He talked about that.
Hey, wait, is he a 90-year-old in a 40-year-old body, or how's he do?
No, Ray's he's, I don't know how old Ray is, but he's a 40-year-old stuck in an older body, but he's As I look at this and I kind of watch this thing take place, the concept of not letting me fix my tractor thing, I think is, it's not necessarily, what they're saying is not accurate. I think you have access to everything you want to have access to. You can do all the stuff you want to. What they're not going to give you access to is the codes to make your tractor go from 25 mile an hour to 50 mile an hour, or jack your horsepower up from 450 horsepower to 700 horsepower. Those kind of things is what's not going to happen. And I think as I look at these kind of scenarios play out in the subscription-based models and all those kind of things, there's not one thing that you do today. I don't care. I just updated my Adobe subscription so I can convert stuff from PDF to Word documents and whatnot. Technology is a subscription-based model and everywhere. And you're seeing the same thing take place and take hold in the agriculture sector. And because not so much, you look at the robotics and all the stuff that come into play and the various things that are out there. As I look at it, to me, it's one of those things. You don't have to use that technology to do anything, but if you want to maximize what's out there, then it's going to be a subscription. And I think that's just part of the world that we live in now. Whether we're looking at software for your computer or software for your equipment, even your car. So, I mean, there's subscription-based model stuff for your car that people are doing. So, I mean, I'm not really, I guess I'm in the I don't really care camp when it comes to the.
I recorded a podcast about it and said, is the right to repair much ado about nothing? Because it's my contention that it is. But the other part of it is the New York Times or NPR or some left-leaning, I'm hesitant to even call them news outlets, media, grab a hold of this story and they dispense the 31-year-old person that's never been on a farm, that's never produced 1 calorie of food. And then they go with what they've already been told by their boss editor. Hey, here's the story we're going to tell. It don't fucking matter what the real story is. Here's the story we're going to tell. John Deere is screwing the little farmer. Monsanto is screwing. And it reminded me of Monsanto all over again. Trust me, I live half the year in the suburbs of Arizona. Damian, and people are over having beers. Hey, you're a farm person, and my wife said that you know all about ag stuff. Now I've got this question. I saw on NPR the Monsanto forces farmers. I'm like, oh, for God's sake! So it's the same thing. I'm like, no, that's not
right.
First off, you don't have to buy Monsanto seed, and then you explain to them the agreement was very simple when they came up with all this technology, triple stack, quad, Roundup Ready. If you buy our stuff, you're not then going to try and pirate our stuff. That's what the agreement is.
Yeah.
Next question, autonomous. I predicted it in my book about the past, present, and future of agriculture, that farm machinery is going to get smaller. It's also going to get autonomous. I also wonder if it's going to get to where there's an Uber effect, because there's bazillions of dollars of capital tied up in machinery that gets used 14 days a year.
Yeah.
You probably would agree with me on the autonomous. Would you agree with me that eventually we see a bunch of different, not all, because yields are too big, but some things, machinery gets more swarm concept, autonomous, smaller, and maybe even you don't own it, the co-op owns it, the retailer owns it, and you just hire the hours?
Yeah, so I talked about that quite a bit on my podcast. My view is that equipment gets smaller and there gets to be more of them. And I think that there are, like those old ADT commercials with the guy that's in some big warehouse space and there's 80,000 people and they're watching these different screens and they're watching your house and making sure that the bad guy didn't get in. I think we're going to see something like that where there's more of a swarm effect and there's one company that comes through and there are several companies that come through and they're monitoring what these machines are doing and they're deployed and they go out to Box Butte County, Nebraska, and there's a giant swarm of planting tractors out there going, and they're planting 5 or 6 machines in one field, and they're harvesting with 5 or 6 machines going at the same time, and there's just somebody somewhere monitoring what's going on. And I think as I watch this happen, I don't see any reason why machine gets bigger.
Well, yeah, which means they get smaller, they get autonomous, and people are like, "Well, I'm not sure how that would work." It's kind of like ordering up I see it eventually. You're ordering up like a pizza. I take this phone out, I order that my 160 acre quarter section in Foxview County. It's getting these inputs. I ordered off the me. It's getting these inputs, this type of seed, et cetera, and then boom. Yes, it's futuristic. Yeah, I see that happening. What thing can autonomous not so easily do? Probably combining and moving the grain is my thought. And I'm not talking about moving it to the edge of the field. It can't get it probably from the edge of the field to the grain elevator 47 miles away.
I think that's the hard part, the logistics that come out of the field. I think, the combine dumping into the grain cart and then, going to the end of the field or dumping into a semi truck or whatever. I think that part's very simple. They've already had a concept out there. Raven now owns it, but Smart, what's it called? Smart Ag, I think is what it's called. They had a tractor that was fully autonomous grain cart tractor, and it would, work with the combine and nobody's in the tractor, and it would get to the end of the field. Now the hang up at the end of the field was when it went to go dump in the trailer was they didn't quite have the technology or the access to the hydraulics to make it, to make the auger come out to where it could load the semi trailer. Somebody had to get in and make that work, but that's a simple fix, right? So I think as you're looking at those kind of things,
it's not simple. Let's face it, Casey, it's not simple. It's just that in this day and age when we've gotten so technologically advanced, trust me, if you told your grandfather said, a robotic machine going down the field is now going to open the arm up and it's not doing it right now, but that's a simple fix. He'd be like, what the hell are you talking about? Robotic combines? It's not a simple fix, but where we are, I guess we should say it's not exponentially harder. It's incrementally incrementally harder, which isn't much. Incrementally to fix it. Yeah, go ahead.
See, as you look at how those things come together and play out, I mean, the logistics of getting the grain from wherever in the field to wherever you're storing it or taking it to the elevator or whatever it is that you're doing, that's going to be the part I think that has a longer term, more robust kind of thought process as to what happens there. So that's going to be the other thing. And kind of the other point, like why is stuff going to get smaller? I mean, when you're relying on humans to still maintain and functionally go out and operate these machines, you have to have bigger machine to cover more acres than what's out there. If no one's driving these machines, you don't have to worry about creature comforts and everything else that come into play. And, a 50-foot head on the front of a combine and that kind of stuff, because you need to get a bunch of acres done because you have a limited supply of labor. I think now all of a sudden you're looking at, doesn't matter. You have you might have a combine out there with 8-foot head on it, and you might have 10 of them in the field working 24/7. So it's just, that's a difference, I think, in the idea of what we're talking about. I mean, and at that point, why do you need to have a bunch of combines or a bunch of tractors or a bunch of whatever's out there when you're only going to use them for this, brief amount of time? It makes more sense to like a company like, what's the name of that company? Machinery Link. That was way ahead of its time, way ahead of its time.
Casey, I have been saying this for a while, and I've had people that, and I'm not being mean, but I don't think that they have vision, and vision's a difficult thing. Most people, their idea of vision is they can see something. No, can you visualize something? Yeah. And so when I say, again, look at the money. When we're talking about 8 to 9% to now maybe 10% money, and you talked about a machinery dealer sitting on a $450,000 piece of equipment at 8 to 9%, it's $3,500 a month that they're burning. Well, what about the farmer? If I'm sitting on that $500,000, but I'm not just sitting on that. I'm sitting on combine, planter, sprayer, multiple tractors, all that technology that you've already discussed. I might have an average farmer in the United States might have $2 to $4 million worth of machinery sitting in a tool shed, right?
Right. Oh, sure. Easy. Yeah.
So $4 million of machinery sitting in a tool shed at 8%. I'm not the smartest guy, but I think that's a few $100,000 a year. So you tell me that we can't find options that maybe make better return on the capital. That's what's going to push it.
Yeah. And I think ultimately when it comes down to it, I mean, there's not like we're getting an influx of farmers coming back and this whole new generation of farming being, thrusted back into the ag economy. we're looking at a difference in what kids are doing when they get out there. They still want to go into agriculture somehow, maybe not being on the farm, but maybe they want to, go do some other things that are ag related. You're starting to see some of that. And some of that too is just because of the operation that they're going to go back to. It just may not be suitable to and support what they're doing. So I think I look at some of the stuff and I see a bigger opportunity here to bring in not just brand new set of farm kids to come and do whatever, but a lot of technology folks, a lot of Silicon Valley types that are going to come in and start looking at how do we do this better and can we use technology to make it happen.
Well, we're seeing that in the ag tech already.
Sure.
You go to some of these field days and you see a bunch of people with skinny jeans that are straight off the plane from the Bay Area of California that are asking
Right.
you what the nicest restaurant is, and you're like, you're in Cherokee County, Nebraska. There's a convenience store on Highway 16 over here. What the hell are you talking about?
You got some Hunt Brothers pizza downtown you can go get. So yeah.
Right. Hey, a couple, my last two things. Once you and I talked, I got two things. Where does the used go? And then barometer of economy. Then we're going to get out of here. Once and I talked about used machinery going overseas. Brazil was behind us 30 years ago. I don't think they are anymore. Argentina, Australia, Ukraine, Russia, whatever. You talked to me once in a previous recording that we found a place for 12-year-old machinery. It would go to a country that was behind us technologically. Is that still happening, or is the stuff does it get sold here, stays here now? I'm talking U.S. and Canada, basically. When I say, because I have a lot of Canadian listeners.
Yeah, I think when I look at that scenario just laid out, it's not so much that they're technically behind where we're at. It's just their access to capital, and I think that's the driving factor. So if you look at like Vietnam, for example, you see some stuff over there where they have a need. Ukraine for the longest time was everybody's hope and prayer to go send used equipment to, but not so much anymore. But if you're looking at where the demand for, I think something at one time I read an article that was something like Ukraine had a immediate need for 4,000 combines. Take 4,000 combines out of the U.S. market and you stick them in Ukraine.
Our dumping ground was always Ukraine.
It was. I mean, that's where, because it had the most immediate need for what it was. Yeah. But ultimately, at the end of the day, the problem there was access to capital. And I think that's what the driving factor is. So with the countries that you're starting to look at, I read an article today about Mongolia, and they're going through a whole revamping of their agriculture process to be more modern and to be less reliant upon other countries to get their food. And you're seeing them start to use more technology. So they might start looking at 5 and 6 year old stuff where they used to buy 25 and 30-year-old stuff. So you're kind of working through all those things. The biggest misconception, I think, when you look at the export marketplace with most folks is that the United States population has no real familiarity with how good we actually have it when it comes to buying products, because we live on the dollar. The dollar is the kind of the peg against everything else in the world. And if you pick the currency decides to go one way or the other, or the dollar goes up or something like that, we don't feel that in the United States. Everybody else feels that. And that's the biggest constraint, I think, when it comes to export marketing.
Yep. All right. Last question, since you're talking about dollars and money, dear listeners, he's not just some dumb iron jock. He's really smart, which is why I love having him on here. And I loved having beers with him at 2 years ago at the conference that he had me come to. Casey, barometer of the economy, ag economy. I think machinery. Okay, I think that the ag economy is always counter-cyclical and generally is predictive of things that might be coming. We started seeing inflation of commodity prices and then inflation of inputs, and I said, and that's going to be coming to Main Street next year. And I was all over that, and people were like, how do you know? I said, because ag is always a little bit off cycle, and ag is a lot of times predictive. ag has made really good money. 2019, okay, we started having that tariff relief money or whatever the hell it's called, TAF or something like this. And then we had it in 2020, 21 and 22, we rang the bell without any of the USDA monies because we just had really, really good years. 2023 is going to be a good year. But 24 might be a little worse. And I could see things getting a little tight, 25, 26. Does your view of the equipment industry indicate or predict anything 1, 2, and 4 years from now?
That's a good question. I can't say that when I look at the ag equipment that we see coming in on trade, as those things move in, we're trying to guess the market out in a lot of cases 6 to 9 months out, and that's because that's when the stuff comes back in. So, are we looking at various symbols out there and what do the tea leaves hold for? Sure, we're trying to do that all we can and trying to see where things are going directionally and trying to guess that. I agree with what you're saying. I think 24 and 25 are going to be a little tighter as things move through, and we start looking at some various factors that come into play on where those crop prices end up and those kind of things. But my biggest predictor that I'm looking at now is what the true cost of money is and the amount of money that is needed to pay the operating notes that we're out there looking at now and those kind of things. Those to me are we could have. I joked with that guy now, it's like $5.50 corn is the new $4 corn. You know what I mean? So it's the dollars that are associated with these operations are now so big that the interest dollars that are being associated with those too, like your 9.6% or whatever you're talking about. I mean, that's a lot of money when you start really cracking that down, and that's going to start showing itself, I think, as these machines, as you start looking at these various things that are coming into play. And I really believe that as we look into 24 and 25, we will see some tightening of that. And I think we're starting to see that a little bit now because we're trying to cut the fat in the inventories that we have right now, just because of, again, back to the interest thing, the cost of hold and those kind of things. You're trying to run as lean as possible, but still maintain the right number of used equipment out there for the buying public.
I think we're going to leave it there, but I always want to give you, since you know about hosting good shows because you put one on. Again, he's Casey Seymour. His podcast is called Moving Iron. He's got a company called Moving Iron LLC. He doesn't just host a podcast. He's an equipment expert. He gets called in, by the way. Do you still get that as the expert sort of advisor, like money folks or Wall Street people or even political folks use you as a consultant, like, hey, what the hell's going on out there? Because they have no idea what happens in Nebraska, let alone in the farm machinery dealership. Do you still get called?
Yeah, I still get some calls from time to time about guys working through stuff. A lot of Wall Street guys call me. So
yeah. So anyway, if you need to know what's going on and you didn't hear it in this podcast, look him up. It's Casey Seymour. The podcast is called Moving Iron. His company's called Moving Iron LLC. You can find him. He's like, I think he's 1/3 of the entire economy in his Western Nebraska county because it's like him and 14 other people that live out there, right?
There we have our sparseness for sure. Yeah.
Anyway, he's awesome. Look him up. I really appreciate being here as a guest because you always have great stuff to talk about.
Damian, I appreciate it, man. I really admire what you're doing, and you're doing a lot of good things for ag too. So keep up the hard work, man.
Thanks for being here. I wish I was as expert in one area as you. So since I'm not, you've got the breadth and the depth in one area of machinery. So I just have to try and be know a little bit about a whole bunch of things out here. And you've helped me learn a lot about machinery over the time. If you like what we're doing here, share it with a friend. We've got a lot of really good listeners. We are a bit of a community here at the Business of Agriculture. Also, please go and check out the videos if you want to watch it. And that's at YouTube and Acres TV. Also, if you like what you're hearing here, remember that I have a side business. I work for Extreme Ag with no E on the front of it. Extremeag.farm is the website. Hundreds of videos and podcasts we're doing there. And it's a lot more about the production agriculture stuff, trials and products and practices that you can use on your farming operation. So check that out also. Till next time, Casey, you're awesome. Thanks for being here. Good luck with your conference, which is coming up.
Thanks, man. I appreciate it, Damian. We'll catch you down the road, bud.
Till next time, I'm Damian Mason, and this is the Business of Agriculture. Well, that concludes another fantastic episode of The Business of Agriculture. This episode was brought to you by Pattern Ag. You know, everybody in agriculture understands the importance of soil health. We also keep an eye on our soil better than we ever did through advanced soil testing. But what if there was a company that provided predictive analytics, not just checking out nutrients and all the elements that are in there, but also could tell you the degree of risk you face with disease and pest pressure? That's right, Pattern Ag can do that. They actually can tell you, hey, you're going to have a real issue here. You can preemptively, proactively treat for corn rootworm or cyst nematode or sudden death syndrome before the problem actually starts costing you yield. Go to pattern.ag, that's www.pattern.ag, to find the nearest rep that can help you start doing better for your soil.